Hello, we are the Ministry of the Real Truth, and we strive, as always, to bring you the real truth, the whole truth, and nothing but that truth. No hype, fluff, or other nonsense. Today we ask, how reliable are the so-called, quote, church fathers, unquote? These being Polycarp, Eusebius, Irenaeus, Origen, etc., and their writings, and how reliable, credible are those who write of them or quote them extensively from their writings, their books, and so forth. We make an examination of these so claimed, quote, church fathers, unquote, and their writings by simply asking questions in regard to them. Quote, we are not here to answer all the questions, but to question all of the answers, or to question all the answers. Grasshopper, aka Kai-Chan Kane, Kung Fu TV series. At a blog site named AmazingDiscoveries.org, we believe that is a WordPress blog, it is asked, did Jesus or the Christ exist? Much historical evidence proves that he did. Then it goes on to state the 27 different New Testament doctrines. Just has that title, that's it. Then it proceeds to list Roman historical figures or historians, i.e. Tacitus, born 40 years or so after the death and resurrection of Jesus the Christ. We look at what he supposedly wrote, or what was left and translated into English that we have today. Suetonius, another Roman historian, we look at who Suetonius was and what he wrote. What was he all about? This website, the AmazingDiscoveries.org, or this blog site, also states that the Talmud, a collection of Jewish traditions from the 3rd century, states of the death of Christ, or Christ's death, supposedly updated April 2009, hasn't been updated since, I don't think. We strive to examine the best regarded translation into English of that particular Talmud. It doesn't give us a reference to exactly which one it is, but we'll find one that perhaps they did translate from, or simply the best version to read, or the best version translated. It is also noteworthy that Christians throughout the ages were prepared to suffer persecution and even death for his, Jesus Christ's, namesake. And yet human history has been divided into a pre- and post-Christ era. And here's some statements on Tacitus, the Roman historian, writing in about 115 AD. He speaks about Nero's persecution of Christians in the year 64 AD. But all the endeavours of men, all the emperor's largesse, and the propitiations of the gods did not suffice to allay the scandal or banish the belief that the fire had been ordered, that it was all planned and done by certain people. Okay, or that he did it and then he tried to deny it, to blame it on someone else, use someone else as a scapegoat. And so, to get rid of this rumour, Nero set as the culprits and punished with the utmost refinery of cruelty a class hated for their abominations, who are commonly called Christians. Christus, from whom their name is derived, was executed at the hands of the procurator Pontius Pilate in the reign of Tiberius. Checked for the moment, this pernicious superstition again broke out, not only in Judea, the source of the evil, but even in Rome, that receptacle for everything that is sordid and degrading from every quarter of the globe, which there finds a following. So basically that Nero sets Rome on fire, he's Christian on it, tries to cover his butt, uses a scapegoat, the Christians, local Christians, so they get the persecutions for doing so when it was him all along. Okay, got to keep in mind that Tacitus was born 40 years after the death and resurrection of Christ, and he's looking at the historical Roman records, and he's saying, yeah, Pontius Pilate, his procurator at that time, or the procurator at that time, had Christ executed. Suetonius, the Roman historian, he refers to Christus, which is probably a confusion of Christus, i.e. Christ. So this word Christian derives from the Greek. It's a loan word used by the Romans from the Greek, okay, often spelled as Christos, or with a K-R-I-S-T-O-S. So we're looking at this translation of Tacitus's supposed writings. Read somewhere that they didn't have the complete translation, but it's amazing how they've translated all his books, the Histories and the Annals. So we're looking at his book, the Annals, put out by the Reader's Digest organisation. They have a lot of books, great books of the Western world, and titled that, Great Books of the Western World, by Robert Maynard Hutchins, Editor-in-Chief, looking at the Book of Annals of Tacitus, page 168, paragraph 2, it's got 44 here. Okay, to compare it with what this blog site has written. But all human efforts, all the lavish gifts of the emperor and the propitiations of the gods did not banish the sinister belief that the conflagration was the result of an order. It is a slight word difference here. They have conflagration here. On this blog site it has fire. Was the result of an order. Consequently, to get rid of the report, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations for Christians by the populace, by the peoples, Roman peoples. Christus was, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilate, and a most mischievous superstition thus checked for the moment again broke out now not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome, where all things hideous and shameful from every part of the world find their centre and became popular. So what he did was he used those Christians as a blame. He played the blame game on them, used them as a scapegoat, and they got persecuted. There was a period where others, Romans, senators, whoever, wanted to really punish these Christians because they didn't do the daily sacrifices, the bull sacrifices, everything Roman, pagan Rome. But someone said, no, leave them alone, they're right, they're not, no harm, they're not doing anything wrong. But these certain people kept pushing to have them persecuted, and then a decree was made, no congregations, no meeting in secret, etc. Those who get caught with material, writings, or in secret meetings will be punished severely. So it's pretty much the same as what's seen here in the book, the Annals of Tacitus. And they go on about Suetonius, the Roman historian. He refers to Christus, which is probably a confusion of Christus, i.e. Christ, in his life, and Claudius, the emperor from 41 to 54, which was written about 120 AD. He is probably referring to quarrels between Jews and Christians about Jesus. Since the Jews were continually making disturbances at the instigation of Christus, or Christ, he, Claudius, the emperor, expelled them from Rome. And as here, the Talmud, a collection of Jewish traditions from the 3rd century, it tells the story of Christ's death. And they go on to state in that Talmud, on the eve of Passover they hanged Yeshua of Nazareth, probably from a tree, And the herald went before him for 40 days, saying, Yeshu of Nazareth is going forth to be stoned, in that he hath practiced sorcery and beguiled. So he's basically hung up on this tree, right? Waiting to be taken down and led off to be stoned, because he's practiced sorcery according to them, and beguiled and led astray Israel. Everyone knowing aught in his defence, come and plead for him, but they found naught in his defence, and hanged him on the eve of Passover. So they either hung him as Judas was hung, or they hung him up on a cross. Right? Depends on what these Easterners are actually saying, what they mean by that. Yeah. So we decided to have a look at these church fathers, so-called church fathers. We're looking at Polycarp, born AD 69, died 155, was a Christian bishop of Smyrna. According to the martyrdom of Polycarp, he died a martyr, bound and burned at the stake, then stabbed when the fire failed to consume his body. Polycarp is regarded as a saint and church father in the Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, Anglican and Lutheran churches. Catholic just means universal. Okay, so by the looks of it, these are all Roman Catholic associated. They're like the breakaways or those under it, both under the mother church. Both Irenaeus and Tatian say that Polycarp had been a disciple of John the Apostle, one of Jesus' disciples. And on illustrious men, Jerome writes, it's one of Jerome's writings, writes that Polycarp was a disciple of John the Apostle, and that John had ordained him as Bishop of Smyrna. Is that the John of Revelations, the Revelator? Polycarp is regarded as one of the three chief apostolic fathers, along with Clement of Rome and Ignatius of Antioch. So they're all Roman Catholic icons associated. Surviving writings and early accounts. Here's some details on his writings, his life, link to the apostles and Jesus, visit to Mathetes, date of martyrdom, and so forth. The martyrdom of Polycarp states that Polycarp was taken on the Sabbath and killed on the Great Sabbath. English patristic scholar William Cave, 1637 to 1713, believed that this was evidence that the Smyrnaeans under Polycarp observed the seventh-day Sabbath, i.e. assembly on Saturdays. B. Lightfoot records as a common interpretation of the expression the Great Sabbath to refer to Pesach or another Jewish festival. This is contradicted by the standard Jewish calendar, in which Nisan 14, the date of the Pesach, can fall no earlier than late March, and hence at least a month after the traditional date of Polycarp's death, February 23rd. Yeah, the standard Jewish calendar, with that Hebrew calendar, is probably a hell of a lot different to the calendar that we have today. It looks like it's lunisolar though. Lunisolar, so that would be moon and sun, right? Okay, whereas our one today is possibly of Roman Catholic origin and solar. So there's a difference between the two days with a capital D in the Aramaic and the Hebrew, Yuma and Yom, and today's understanding of a day in our modern world, in the Western Hemisphere. Okay, there's some importance and some relics and more references. Looking at Eusebius of Caesarea, born around 260-265, died 30 May 339, also known as Eusebius Pamphili. Do we get the word pamphlet from there? He was a Greek historian of Christianity, exegete, and Christian polemicist. Rhetoric and continued rhetoric to support a specific position by forthright claims and to undermine the opposing position, and so forth. In about AD 314, he became the bishop of Caesarea Maritima. That must be like the ports or something like that. Yeah, close to the sea. Yeah, on the coast of the Mediterranean, now in ruins. In the Roman province of Syria, Palestina, so that would have been Syria and Palestine. Together with Theophilus, he was a scholar of the biblical canon and is regarded as one of the most learned Christians during late antiquity. He wrote demonstrations of the gospel, preparations for the gospel, and on discrepancies between the gospels, studies of the biblical texts. As father of church history, not to be confused with the title of church father, he produced the ecclesiastical history on the life of Theophilus, the chronicle, and on the martyrs, etc., etc. Although Eusebius' works are regarded as giving insight into the history of the early church, he was not without prejudice, especially in regard to the Jews. So he might have been bias, prejudice, or anti-Semite. For while Eusebius indeed blames the Jews for the crucifixion of Christ, or Jesus, he nevertheless also states that forgiveness can be granted even for this sin and that the Jews can receive salvation. Some scholars question the accuracy of Eusebius' works. For example, at least one scholar, Lynn Cohick, American New Testament scholar and author, academic dean and professor of New Testament at Northern Seminary, dissents from the majority view that Eusebius is correct in identifying the Mileto of Papias with the etc., etc. Cohick claims as support for her position that Eusebius is a notoriously unreliable historian, and so anything he reports should be critically scrutinized. Eusebius' life of Constantine, which he wrote as an eulogy shortly after the emperor's death in AD 37, is often maligned for perceived factual errors deemed to by some so hopelessly flawed that it cannot be the work of Eusebius at all. Well, apparently he's a great fan of Constantine in his era, so he would have wanted to write, or here, as it states, it would be politically expedient for him to present Constantine in the best light possible. Catholic dogmatic theology, patristic period about AD 100 to 800, about the fathers of the church, honoured by the church as the principal theologians. This is the Roman Catholic Church. You can read that in your own time, at your own leisure, all about that Roman Catholic Church. Patristic period and the fathers of the church who are honoured by them as her principal theologians. We have this man here, Irenaeus, born 130 to 202 AD, a Greek bishop noted for his role in guiding and expanding Christian communities in the southern regions of present-day France, and more widely for the development of Christian theology. The theology of Christian belief and practice. Such study concentrates primarily upon the text of the Old Testament and of the New Testament, as well as on Christian tradition. Christian theologians use biblical exegesis and so forth. So that's their ideal of the Christian faith, of the scriptures, etc., okay, and what they put out there. He was responsible for the development of Christian theology by combating heresy or anything that went against that Roman Catholic Church, right? The Mother Church and scriptures, etc., and defined orthodoxy. Originating from Smyrna, he had seen and heard the preaching of Polycarp, who in turn was said to have heard John the Evangelist, and thus was the last known living connection with the apostles. Was that John the Evangelist as in John the Baptist, or John the author of, John the Apostle, John of Patmos, or John the Presbyter of Revelations, right, the book of Revelations. Okay. Chosen as Bishop of Lugdunum, now Leon, his best known work is against heresies, often cited as Aversus, etc., etc. a refutation of Gnosticism, in particular that of Valentinus. To counter the doctrines of the Gnostic sects claiming secret wisdom, he offered three pillars of orthodoxy: the scriptures, the tradition handed down from the apostles, and the teaching of the apostles' successors, and so forth. So he pooh-poohed those Gnostics. He is recognised as a saint in the Catholic Church, which celebrates his feast on 28th June. Who are the ones that make them saints? You know, they had to be martyred first, had to die first to become a saint. There was one who actually was still living and was deemed a saint. You got some people in the background, everyday people swearing, but we'll just ignore that. Irenaeus was a Greek from Polycarp's hometown of Smyrna in Asia Minor, now Izmir, Turkey, born during the first half of the 2nd century. The exact date is thought to be between the year 1200 and 140, and so forth. A lot more history there. Irenaeus argued that the true gnosis is in fact knowledge of Christ, which redeems rather than escapes from bodily existence. Religious historian Elaine Pagels criticizes Irenaeus for describing Gnostic groups as sexual libertines, for example when some of their own writings advocated chastity more strongly than did Orthodox texts. However, the Nag Hammadi texts do not present a single coherent picture of any unified Gnostic system of belief, but rather divergent beliefs of multiple Gnostic sects. Some of these sects were indeed libertine because they considered bodily existence meaningless. Others praised chastity and strongly prohibited any sexual activity, even within marriage, and so forth. And there's some more references to scripture there. Apostolic authority. In his writings against the Gnostics, who claimed to possess a secret oral tradition from Jesus himself, Irenaeus maintained that the bishops in different cities are known as far back as the apostles, and that the oral tradition he lists from the apostles is a safe guide to the interpretation of scripture. In a passage that became a locus classicus, or local classic, of Catholic Protestant polemics, he cited the Roman Church as an example of the unbroken chain of authority which texts Catholic polemics would use to assert the primacy of Rome over Eastern churches, say like the possibly the Syrian Apostolic Orthodox Catholic Church or the East, and the writings that were given them by, supposedly by Thomas or one or two of the other disciples, and they set up the church there. Catholic polemics would use to assert the primacy of Rome over Eastern churches by virtue of its preeminent authority. The succession of bishops and presbyters was important to establish a chain of custody for orthodoxy. Irenaeus' point when refuting the Gnostics was that all of the apostolic churches had preserved the same traditions and teachings in many independent streams. It was a unanimous agreement between these many independent streams of transmission that proved the Orthodox faith current in those churches to be true. Theology in contrast with Gnosticism. The central point of Irenaeus' theology is the unity and the goodness of God, in opposition to the Gnostics' theory of God, a number of divine emanations, eons, along with a distinction between the monad and the demiurge, and so forth. Unity of salvation history, Christ's life, use of Paul's epistles, so forth. Christ is the new Adam. To counter his Gnostic opponents, Irenaeus significantly develops Paul's presentation of Christ as the last Adam. Valentinian Gnosticism. Valentinian Gnosticism was one of the major forms of Gnosticism that Irenaeus opposed. It goes great detail there on that. This is Quarto Deciman controversy. Irenaeus took part in the Quarto Deciman controversy when Victor I of Rome tried to force a universal practice of feasting until Easter to supersede the Jewish practice and prevent Christians from partaking of the Passover. Polycrates, or Polycrates, who led the churches of Asia Minor, continued to hold on to traditions of the Paschal feast. For this reason, Victor I wanted to excommunicate Polycrates and his supporters, but this was a step too far for Irenaeus and other bishops. So they didn't want Christians partaking in the Passover of the Jews, the Jewish practice. So they set out to try and stop that. By the sounds of it. You have Origen. Origenism redirects here for the controversy over Origen's ideas. See Origenus of Crises. Okay, he was born 184, died 253, also known as Origen Adamantius, an early Christian scholar, ascetic and theologian who was born and spent the first half of his career in Alexandria. He was a prolific writer who wrote roughly 2,000 treatises in multiple branches of theology, including textual criticism, a branch of textual scholarship, philology, and of literary criticism that is concerned with the identification of textual variants or different versions of either manuscripts or of printed books. He sought martyrdom with his father at a young age, but was prevented from turning himself into the authorities by his mother. When he was 18 years old, Origen became a catechist. What's that? Basic Christian religious education. He undertook that right of children and adults, often from a catechism book. It started as education of converts to Christianity, but as the religion became institutionalized, catechesis was used for education of members. Okay, that was at the Catechetical School of Alexandria. He devoted himself to his studies and adopted an ascetic lifestyle as a monk, as both a vegetarian and teetotaler. He only drank tea. He came into conflict with a person called Demetrius, sounds like a Greek, bishop and patriarch of Alexandria. The bishop of Alexandria in 231 and so forth. Demetrius condemned Origen for insubordination and accused him of having castrated himself and of having taught that even Satan would eventually attain salvation, an accusation which Origen vehemently denied, and so forth. He was tortured for his faith during the Tatian persecution in 250 and died 3 to 4 years later from his injuries. Origen was able to produce a massive quantity of writings because of the patronage of his close friend Ambrose of Alexandria, who provided him a team of secretaries to copy his works, making him one of the most prolific writers in all of antiquity, and so forth. Origen is considered by some Christian groups to be a church father, though he does not have the status in Orthodox Christianity. He is widely regarded as one of the most influential Christian theologians. His teachings were especially influential in the East, with Athenagoras of Alexandria and the 3 Cappadocian fathers being among his most devoted followers. Argument over the orthodoxy of Origen's teachings spawned the first Origenist crisis, which was 2 major theological controversies in early Christianity involved the teaching of followers of the 3rd century Alexandrian theologian Origen. He was attacked by Epiphanius of Salamis, looks like Salamis, and Jerome, but defended by, wow, these names, Tyrannus, Rufinus, and John of Jerusalem in 543. Emperor Justinian condemned him as a heretic and ordered all his writings to be burned. The Second Council of Constantinople in 553 may have anathematized something or someone detested, shunned in its other main usage. It is in formal excommunication. The latter meaning is ecclesiastical sense is based on the New Testament usage. It may have only been condemned. It may have only condemned certain heretical teachings, which claimed to be derived from Origen. His teachings on the pre-existence of souls were rejected by the Church. Okay, so all of this information about Origen's life comes from a lengthy biography of him in Book 6 of the Ecclesiastical History, written by the Christian historian Eusebius. Okay, he portrays Origen as a perfect Christian scholar and as a literal saint. Eusebius, however, wrote this account almost 50 years after Origen's death and had access to few reliable sources on Origen's life, especially his early years. Anxious for more material about his hero, Eusebius recorded events based only on unreliable hearsay evidence and frequently made speculative inferences about Origen based on the sources he had available. Nonetheless, scholars can reconstruct a general impression of Origen's historical life by sorting out the parts of Eusebius' account that are accurate from those that are inaccurate. Okay. There's more information on him. Alleged self-castration. Travels and early writings. Conflict with Demetrius and removal to Caesarea. Working teaching in Caesarea, and so forth. He's against someone called Celsus. Other writings. Christology. Origen writes that Jesus was the firstborn of all creation who assumed a body and a human soul, and so forth. Ethics. Origen was an ardent believer in free will, the capacity of agents to choose between different possible courses of action unimpeded. So they can decide, well, this is how I see it. Yeah, no one could stop them, right? Could interfere. Okay, so here it says, furthermore, in his interpretation of the story of Jacob and Esau, Origen argues that the condition into which a person is born is actually dependent upon what their souls did in this pre-existent state. Okay. According to Origen, the superficial unfairness of a person's condition at birth, with some humans being poor, others rich, some being sick and others healthy, is actually a byproduct of what the person's soul had done in the pre-existent state. So that, I don't think it's talking about reincarnation, but it's like pre-incarnation? Possibly? Pre-existence. He was a pacifist. Hermeneutics. Origen bases his theology on the Christian scriptures and does not appeal to Platonic teachings without having first supported his argument with a scriptural basis. He saw the scriptures as divinely inspired and was cautious never to contradict his own interpretation of what was written in them. So these are his interpretations, and so forth. Theology. Origen's conception of God the Father is apophatic, also known as negative theology, is a form of theological thinking and religious practice which attempts to approach God, the divine, by negation, to speak only in terms of what may not be said about, etc. Okay. A perfect unity, invisible and incorporeal, transcending all things, etc., etc. He significantly contributed to the development of the concept of the Trinity. Okay, it's probably first brought to one's attention or created by Tatian, which, when you compare that and the modern understanding of Christianity, Trinity today by Christians, and the ancient Mesopotamian, in line with the winged disc icon, in the triune, there is a vast difference, if you know the meaning that surrounds that Mesopotamian winged disc icon. You'll find that there is a vast difference there, and so forth. It goes on a bit, the logos, so forth. First Origen crisis, getting attacked by Salamis, and the second one, and etc. etc. Origen is often noted for being one of the few church fathers who is not generally regarded as a saint. Nevertheless, there are notable individuals who refer to Origen as Saint Origen. This includes Anglicans such as Edward Welchman, John Howson, Sir Winston Churchill, Calvinists such as Pierre Bayle, and so forth. And here's a little Mr. Google on Origenism. The initial attack by Saint Epiphanius was taken up by Saint Jerome in 398. Rufinus issued his Latin translation of the De Principiis, probably the Principles, which was designed to vindicate Origen's orthodoxy. But in 400, a council at Alexandria condemned Origenism, and Pope Anastasius I and the bishops of Palestine and Syria adhered to the condemnation. Origenism, the doctrines ascribed to Origen of Alexandria, one of the outstanding ecclesiastical writers of the early half of the 3rd century. He claimed that scriptures has a threefold sense: the literal, the spiritual, and the mystic. Many passages have no literal meaning and must be interpreted in an allegorical way. Origenism, a dictionary definition of it. The number of theories either charged or attributed to Origen AD 185 to 254, the great biblical exegete and spiritual writer. Among these theories was a pre-existence of souls, denial, etc., and many more explanations. Okay, we have Walter Vaith, who bought or promotes this blog site, AmazingDiscoveries.org. Professor Walter J. Vaith with PhD. So did a little look around to dig up his history. And he was born in 1949 and was a South African zoologist and Seventh-day Adventist, author and speaker known for his work in nutrition, creationism and biblical exegesis. He was a professor of the zoology department at the University of Cape Town and taught in the medical bioscience department. During this time, the department was awarded by Royal Society London grant for zoological research. After joining the Seventh-day Adventist Church, he rejected the theory of evolution, Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, in favour of creationism, and so had to give up teaching at the University of Cape Town. As a creationist, he speaks internationally on this and other topics. His lectures, videos and books promote creationist and Adventist beliefs and doctrines. These include an evangelical understanding of the Bible with a very strong commitment to the Textus Receptus. That's the all printed editions of the Greek New Testament from Erasmus's Novum Instrumentum Omni 1516 to the 1633 Elzeva edition. It was the most commonly used text type for Protestant denominations. Rumour has it that this Erasmus was a little bent. He used to write love letters to some man saying, "Why don't you love me?" You know, like he'd love a woman, or this sort of stuff. Yeah, so he could have been homosexually influenced, right? And put that in his translations. He's trying to complete the works of Jerome. So yeah, he supposedly, we've seen somewhere else, another source, that he or the NIV, New International Version, had that David kissed Nathan on the lips until he grew hard, and then apparently the editor saw it, so we can't have that, so they changed it to exceedingly. This is just what we've found in our personal research. So yeah, it may have, his version translations may have homosexual undertones, because there's a lot of kissing and a lot of love me like a woman type indications in that, but that could be just mere speculation, someone's bias, prejudice, etc. You have to do your own personal research and actually verify that as fact. Okay, this is a childhood of Walter Vaith, who grew up in a strict Catholic home. His mother, a Protestant, died early from cancer, etc., etc. Okay, and then this guy, his religious teacher, because of his mother's death, non-Catholic beliefs, right, and she died, she would languish forever and ever in hell. This prompted Vaith to become an atheist at the age of 10, and he started zoology, teaching and religious development. Okay, and he may have latched onto that. Vaith teaches in his lectures the basic pillars of Adventism, which he believes are an extension of the Reformation's founding principles, including sola gratia, sola Christos, sola scriptura, grace alone, Christ alone, the Bible alone, and a pillar of the Reformation, the identity of the Antichrist. He states that Adventism has proceeded from the beliefs of the Reformation, which eventually fell into creeds and made 5 key discoveries, along with 3 angels' messages. Interpretation of the messages given by 3 angels in Revelations 14:6-12. The Seventh-day Adventist Church teaches that these messages are given to prepare the world for the end times, which make the Adventist denomination unique. And here's some more information here. Vaith's view of the KJV Bible. Vaith holds that some of the new versions of the Bible coming out came from manuscripts with corruptions introduced by Alexandrian text, and varies and is less reliable than the majority text. The Adventist Church does not hold a KJV only view, majority text. Although a number of Adventists continue to prefer the King James Version because of his 2004 lecture, War of the Bibles, Vaith was denied access to SDA churches in Germany for a time, but was reinstated in 2010. A periodical recommended that Vaith revise from scratch future comments on this topic to be balanced, fair and serious, or to dispense with them. The Adventist Biblical Research Institute disagrees with Vaith's view of Bible translations. Conspiracy theories. He also made claims in recent DVDs that the COVID-19 pandemic is one of the signs of the imminent coming of Christ, in line with his 2027 claim. This is not supported by the church he is a member of. And he makes some more claims. These are books, publications. Okay, what's this? Editing. Okay, you can edit that. Okay, that's not of importance to us. Clicked on that by accident. So there is the brief history. The video may appear long. Of all the church fathers mentioned here by Professor Walter J. Vaith, PhD, Vaith, right, and his claims, according to the history of him, about him. Okay, he's still alive. He's around about 72 or 73 these days. So basically this is his blog, his website, asking did Jesus ever exist, amongst other questions, and providing so-called historical evidence. And according to the writings of the Church Fathers, Polycarp, Eusebius, Irenaeus, Origen, and others who are Roman historians like Tacitus, Suetonius, and the Talmud. Okay, he talks about there's history of Polycarp here, Eusebius, Catholic dogma, because that's what it all is. It's all Catholic related. Mother Church. Okay, Irenaeus, Origen, Origenism. What does it actually mean? What is it all about? Okay, so if you enjoyed this video, then please subscribe to our channel, give us a like, add your comments down below in the comment section, and we'll get back to you on those as soon as we can, as soon as possible. And give us a like, and then share this video with all your Jewish, Christian, Islamic family, friends, neighbours, strangers, and tell them all about us, the Ministry of the Real Truth, where we strive to bring you all the real truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, without the need to resort to hype, fluff, or other baloney sausage.